Hello everybody and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host Anne, and disembodied hands, Quindy, Justin, and John. How are you all today? Hail. Yes, awkward because see, I even jumped on, but you know, the raid was ahead of me. Hi everybody. Hello, hello. We're ogring today. We are ogring. Yes, we shall ogre. It's like wassailing, right? Only ogring. Or something like that. Probably, I would say it involves less drinking, but he's plainly got this giant cask on his side. So maybe it actually is synonymous with ogre wassailing. Who knows? Whatever the case, I am hello, Sean Allen. Hello, everybody. Hello, Cajun. And Tabitha Lynn. Hey, has been a while. Glad to see you all today. Oh no, I forgot my palette. Oh, fail. Fail. Painter, fail. 1 second, let me grab it. Ah. This is the problem when I'm working on stuff in the other room at night, and then I totally forget to grab my palette before I come in here today. I actually painted a lot last night. I was working on, I'll show you guys briefly, and then we'll get back to Reaper stuff. I was working on this lady. I actually got a lot of her skin tones tuned up, so the light is more evident now as to where it's falling from, as you can see. So now we can plainly see, hopefully, the light falling from above. Are we hearing tapping? I'm not tapping. So far as I know. But yeah, so got her skin tones a bit more further along. I feel like they still need to be a little smoother. That's just me. This is kind of an exercise in faster painting for me. Because like Sergio and Luca do very, very fast painting. Good fast painting, as we like to call it. But I am a slow painter. I tend to be very, very, I tend to crawl along at the speed of glaciers. So my fiance, David, has been telling me that I need to paint faster. Essentially that I need to stop overthinking it and just try to paint something faster. So that the dragon lady, as he calls it, the forest demon, as I call it, she's my kind of faster paint thing. Ah, I see what it is. Boop. Okay, how about that? Any light thumping sound? I switched my mic yesterday for Crow's Nest. Switched it to the other side of one of my lights. Yes, and that is what you were hearing. So essentially it had moved a little bit and it was pressing against the mic. So every time I'm just going to move that and hopefully that'll be good. Yay! Yeah. The mic was just a little too close to the overhead light because I use a double light setup. So exactly. I could even use a triple light setup if I put on this light, but I don't really feel like I need more. So I've got enough light. Technically, I already am using a triple light setup because we have a window right here. So good, good, good. Yes. Thanks for letting me know, you guys, since I'm experimenting a little bit. Michael said my mic was a little bit soft, so essentially when I do this, I can move it a little farther toward me, and hopefully I will be clearer for you guys. Yes, all the lights, exactly. I have a lot of light in this room. I learned early on, and this is actually, well, here we go, Reaper Pro Tips, right? But pro tip, I learned that eye strain when painting was, for me, less about how long I painted and more about how much light I had when I painted. I found that when I really flooded my work area with light, I didn't suffer from eye strain at all. Like, my eyes did not get fatigued. But if I didn't have enough light, then painting for a substantial amount of time would indeed cause my eyes to get tired and strained. So pro tip for you. And I don't think I've ever mentioned that actually on this show before. Wow. There are still things I have not shared with you guys. Crazy. Let's do some wood today. We got a lot of wood going on here. I want to try shading it with purple, probably a bluish purple, because I want to essentially hit the complement of the light color. And since I'm using such a strong golden color light, which actually I have to work with that a bit more on the fur as well. But I think I've decided that I'm going to wait to tune everything else yellow until I've got things mapped out. But I do want this light to be yellow, very strongly so, and I was kind of studying a couple of paintings we own that use this kind of effect and noting how the light affects the colors in those paintings. I always say to you guys that it is really, really useful to use actual 2D art as references, and this is a good example. Yeah, exactly, Marble. Exactly. Yeah, that's what I found. So let's use some kind of time-honored wood colors from Reaper. Let's see here. I could do a little bit different. I could do saddle brown with driftwood. Yeah, that would work really well, actually. Let's do this. So saddle brown is a very reddish brown color. It's a lighter reddish brown. And driftwood is the color usually I would use for highlighting wood. It shifts yellow. So these colors may look quite different from each other, but if you mix them or highlight one with the other, it's going to work just fine. And the reason that I'm choosing driftwood, even though I went with saddle instead of shield brown, which is driftwood's normal midtone, is that this one is a little bit more toward like a purpley, and this one is a little bit more toward a yellow. And I just mentioned how the light in this piece is quite yellow. So I think if I do kind of a mix or a highlighting with these, I'll be able to shade down toward a purple very easily on this color, and this should make a good highlight for it. So that is my thought process, and we will now determine if I am, smoking something or if it works. And I'm probably going to do the wood up here and the wood down here pretty much the same. It's just I have a philosophy of repeating colors across the course of a model. And so that will allow me to do that. And it also kind of makes sense. I mean, I guess you could, if you wanted to, you could make them two different colors. The problem with making them two different colors, okay, so the issue you might run into in making these two sections of wood two different colors is that when you do two different woods on a model, the impulse is usually to make one more of X color and the other more of Y color. Or if you go like a dark brown neutral with one, you're going to go more of a yellowish or reddish brown up here. So by doing that, if you don't just stick to dark brown neutrals or something that is at least two colors that are similar, you're going to be subconsciously introducing another color to your model. If you go really reddish with a wood up here, you've introduced a red element to your model. And if you try to put red elsewhere on the model, especially close to that reddish wood, it may kind of clash. It depends. It depends strongly on the color you use and how close to neutral it is. You could also go with something. Now, what would work is if we decided to go gray with the wood up here, like a grayish color, and brown with the color down here. That would work really well because we've used such a grayed out blue here. So going grayish, especially if we used a little bit of that fur color, that would probably work. It's still not my choice. I think I like to use, like I said, I like to balance colors across a model. I like to repeat colors, even neutrals across a model. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm going to focus on this guy. There we go. So that's kind of just my personal philosophy. And I know a lot of painters prefer to switch it up. When they do, it's often a very organic process like Sergio's, where he'll use brown or reddish brown for multiple things, but you use different reddish browns. Like if he does green and green and green on a model, he'll go slightly different with those greens. Or maybe he'll have 9 greens altogether that he's just working with. It's a very organic process sometimes. When I see him swatch his projects, that's what I notice. So there are many, many ways to decide how to work with color on your minis. And so no one way is the right way. And I prefer to just give you guys kind of perspective on it, and you can decide to try different ways and see what works for you, because that's, in the end, if you're looking to become a good painter, you'll develop a style, and the choices that you make about color and how you work with it and lights and darks and all of that becomes the essence of your style. So it's worth kind of thinking about. It's worth not overthinking, especially if you're at the intermediate stage or the beginning stage, but keep it in mind that it's always worth checking out different artists' techniques, because sometimes, just like with teaching, just like how some instructors will resonate with you and others won't as much, with style, it's the same. You may find that you really like a particular brush or a particular palette or a particular style of shading or any number of things like that. And that inspires you and it gets you going, right? So that's going to influence you as you develop. especially as you develop from a beginning to an intermediate painter. I think people don't realize how much impact the choices you make as you develop can have on your painting style. Oh, thanks, Grax. Yeah, I didn't see chat because I was just keeping up the video screen link that Michael originally sent me, so that I could kind of see him and Jason and their reactions, and I didn't have a big block taken up by chat. So, but yeah, I was on Crow's Nest last night, guys. It was fun. And yeah, so let's do this. Let's block in this, and actually, I'm gonna choose a purple to shade it with right away. But I think, as I mentioned, I'm going to go a little bit blue with it. I'm kind of thinking about Night Sky Indigo. So this is an interesting triad we've got going on then. We're actually going red. Can you see it? We're going kind of blue, red, yellow. We're almost primary, except we're sliding the primaries a little bit here and there. But it's almost that. Night Sky Indigo is a beautiful color for those who have not ever tried it. It's a gorgeous, it has a slight grayed out tone to it, so it's really good with other muted colors like these are. You can see that this is a muted reddish brown. And it tends to work really well with other muted colors. So it's about the color I think I want as far as this model goes. He's definitely got an orangey gold skin tone. And so going with a bluish purple for the shadows on some of this other stuff makes sense. So I'm kind of mucking around, and if I like this, then I may continue it in other areas. 6 inches tall. Let's not. Oh, thank you, Quindy. Thank you. Yes, that's the interview with me yesterday. I talked about my formative years of mini painting and things I've learned, and how I started at Reaper and how the Master Series paint line got, to be my baby and stuff like that. So yeah, it sounds like more of a stabby tool. No, I'll talk to Julie and see what we can figure out. Mostly this month though, I'm trying to get really being really focused. We've got my New Year's resolutions, so I'm trying not to add too many other things into my to-do list for January. If I do that, then I don't do as well. Big stabby tool. I don't know if I want that reputation. Like, really, guys? Am I that ruthless that you think I need a stabby tool? One thing I do think I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to mix a little bit. Remember what I do when I tend to use totally different colors here. I am going to mix a little bit of this saddle brown into that. I'm also going to mix a little bit more saddle brown. So that's going to shift it, and it's going to kind of tint it a little bit. And I think, do I want to do that? Yeah, I do. I'm just going to put my brush of that in there, and that's also going to mute it out even more. And then I'm going to take that into here and mute that out. But now they're going to be, you're going to see even on the palette, they look more harmonious. So when you're working with different colors for shading and highlighting, you can do that. Or you can just mix them on the model as you're painting, or you can glaze with them, anything like that. I was the best guest in 2 years. Wow. Dang. Not just the best guest of the year, since I was the only guest of the year. Hey, thank you, Daffodweir. Wow, 27 months. Awesome. Thank you. And a 26-month streak. That's impressive. Best lamps for mini painting. Sean Allen, I use, here, let me grab a sticky note and actually write this out for you. I use 2 lamps here. I really believe in having a lamp on either side of me because it eliminates shadows on the model. And as I said, I found that it reduces eye strain. So my brand that I use, and it's really an LED, Tautronics, or however you pronounce it. So it is their LED desk lamp. It is shaped like an L, so it has a base and a stalk and light. Essentially a bunch of LEDs up here. And this is adjustable, so you can tilt it backwards, forward. You can raise the L and lower the L. You can essentially make it a little bit modular. I like the long light bar because it gives me a more even light and it lets me kind of move the light around and still get a fair amount of light. It's also nice because it's got numerous settings for brightness and also for color. It's got 4 different color settings. So it'll give you a reddish, or if you like a blue light when you paint, which some people do, it's supposed to make details show up a little bit better. It's why OttLight is blue. But you can put a more blue setting on here. I tend to here. Is that the blue? Yeah. So that's really blue. Very cool. Do you see how that cooled everything out? I like the daylight setting, which is the reading setting on here. I like a more balanced warm cool light when I paint because I don't like the way that a very blue painting light distorts color. So I prefer to have a very neutral light when I paint. So even here with my, like, I don't have direct sunlight coming in at this time of day through this window, but I do have a wall of vegetation that's bouncing that warm light back at me. So I get a combo warm cool even from my window. But yeah. And these are the lamps that we use at ReaperCon. If you've ever been to ReaperCon or seen pictures, these are the lamps that do that. And this is, I would say, about 1.5 feet tall if it's fully up. And it's about 1 foot long as far as the light bar goes. And they are very inexpensive and LED, and you can travel with them very easily because they fold up. So that is the desk lamp I use. And normally before in my office at Reaper, I would use one of those on either side of me. Then I could angle them and make them where I wanted them to be. Now, because I stream, I have a giant ring light up here. And that ring light is my right-hand light, essentially. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I like LED lights. Essentially, my kind of my three, like, what I want in a light, Sean Allen, is can I control the warm and cool, which I can on this? Can I control the brightness, which I can on this? And does it fold up easily? And is it less destructible so that I can travel with it? And this also fulfills that. So I like that the LED is very hard to break and that the lamp folds up into a relatively small footprint. The base is a bit heavy because obviously it has to hold the lamp secure, but it's still packable. You can pack one to take it on vacation with you if you're traveling or to a con. It's quite easy. So those are kind of the things I look for in a good painting lamp. Alrighty, let's just go over everything. I'm going to go over everything, including the leather at this point. I don't know if I'm going to like this color or not, but we'll find out. And actually, you know what? I'm doing the wrong thing. I'm not using a brush that is large enough for the surface. When base coating, use the biggest brush you can get away with, haha, and still be able to guide the paint around details. I really didn't do anything to his hand yet, did I? So I'm going to use my giant brush. Giant brush. Because giant brush is fast. Base coating is the most boring part of painting, so why spend more time at it than you need to? And that's why I think a lot of people are really gravitated toward James Wapple's blended base coats, where you're essentially using wet blending, you're throwing all sorts of colors at it, you're being loose, you're being intuitive, and you're getting like a beginning highlight, shadow, color scheme down, like from the get-go. And there are times I like that, but because I am very much a painter who gravitates toward layering and glazing instead of a lot of blending and mushing paint together, I tend to be a more orderly painter, I guess. A more regimented painter, a little less loose. That's why I'm trying to get faster, because I'd like to be able to be a little more spontaneous with my painting. I'm going to move this out of frame so we get more of a true color on the Ogre himself. So this may be a little bit too desaturated. Are you seeing that? Because his skin is so very saturated, this is reading as almost a little bit too desaturated. What that tells me is that I need to go stronger. I cannot go this muted on the color. The reason I was able to go with the blue for the loincloth, which is a very grayed out color, is I think because it is close to actual gray, and so it isn't fighting. So I've got two choices here. I can either take it more toward a neutral dark brown with a bit of russet brown in it, which will kind of placate the spirits of brightness that the skin have. Because if you take it more toward a neutral, neutrals go with everything. The other option you have is to take it more vibrant, actually punch it up. So if we did that, we would maybe mix in something like oxide brown or ruddy leather. Colors that are very close together. You can see kind of the differences. Oxide's a little orangier. The ruddy leather's a little more red. It's a little, also a tad darker because it actually has a little bit of black in it. Oh, hello, good morning. Good morning, everyone. So these are both much more intense saturated colors, especially the oxide brown, which is a single pigment like the Chimera colors. So the oxides, the new oxide colors, they're coming out with the Kickstarter 5 as that gets released. Oxide brown, oxide yellow, and oxide red. And these are all single pigments. They're all exactly what their name says they are. So they're essentially clear brights with the earth pigments. And because of that, this is going to pack a big punch of intensity. So we can go that way. What we're going to be doing then is definitely shifting this color very much toward red. It was already kind of a reddish color, but it was a bit washed out. This is going to double down on that. We can still use the indigo as a shadow, as long as we don't let it get too dark. So I think I'm going to go, which is going to give me a better... I think that because he's got such orange tones, remember we used oxide brown already to shade there. I think I'm going to go with this. I think I'm going to kind of bring everything into harmony by going with a similar color to maybe bring things together a little bit better. That's my idea. So I am going to finish painting the base color on this at least, and then I'm going to use the oxide brown to tint it. Sorry, not tint it, but to move the color. Filter it, if you will, glaze it. Bring in a little bit more intensity. So yeah, even when you're dealing with just natural surfaces, you can get into trouble if you go too muted compared to the rest of your color scheme, or too vibrant compared to the rest of your color scheme. And this would not be nearly as much of a problem, by the way, if this wood wasn't taking up so much area. If it was a very small object on the Ogre, chances are it wouldn't clash because it is small, and you can get away with putting a really bright color in a muted color scheme, or vice versa, if the area is quite small. Then essentially it's not going to make enough of a visual impact to really clash. But because we're considering using this all over, and because this club is so big, and also because it's a weapon, it's somewhat a focal point of the piece. So because of all that, that's why it's going to clash. It draws attention, and unfortunately, it is not harmonizing well with the yellow. So we'll get that down, and then we're going to pop. Actually, I'm going to do a mix first. Hey, Grim Parody. Oh, good. Excellent. So the oxides are coming out in March. That's excellent news. Yeah, so be sure to pick up these guys. If you like pure pigment colors, which are very, very mixable and very, very versatile and very, very saturated, these are some of the highest pigmented colors in Master Series. So I'm going to drop a plop of oxide into that. You can see it there, how much more vibrant it looks. And we're going to mix it in, see what it looks like. That's better. I can already see that that's a much better color next to the Ogre. And it still has a lot of our saddle brown in it, so it still preserves kind of the spirit of what I was going for. All right, I'm going to try that down here on the bucket and or the barrel and see if I like it. But I think it's going to work. Yeah, it's still more muted than oxide brown by itself, but it is, you can see how it's got a much more vibrant tone to it here. See it? So just that one drop of oxide brown was enough to seriously shift this color. It shows you how intense that color is and how heavily pigmented it is. There are times when a color can institute a profound shift even without being heavily pigmented. Some pigments have a higher, what we call diffusion, and those have a tendency to spread into and have a high impact on colors they are mixed with, other pigments they are mixed with. Blue and black come to mind as colors where even a small amount of them mixed into other things can shift the color. And some colors are very weak, like yellow. Just, anytime you've tried to mix an orange, you know this, right? Because a tiny bit of red mixed into yellow just like totally takes it way, way more red than orange. So you have to use a very small amount of red with a lot of yellow to get a good orange. So this is still a somewhat muted color, but it is more vibrant. Its biggest trouble right now is that it's not really a light or a dark. It's similar in tone a bit to the skin, but it is a different color and it is warm. I think I'm going to go with this. I can always, in the process of shading and highlighting, this color is going to change a lot. So, as far as the shipping. Oh, you're trying to figure out how it doesn't. GW paint, I mean, the newer line of GW paint is really its own thing, Cajun. Because they concentrate on handing you a fish instead of teaching you to fish, which means they're giving you colors for base coating, they're giving you colors for washes, they're giving you colors for highlighting and dry brushing, and they're all like different. And no other paint line in the world does that. Every other paint line in the world tries to teach you to fish. So they're just going to give you a selection of colors, and then they're going to try, like through mediums like this, through my videos, to teach you how to mix your own washes, how to do shading, you know, if you don't have a bottled wash, how to mix highlights and how to thin them, stuff like that. So it's two different philosophies there. Games Workshop's trying to make it very easy for you. They're giving you training wheels. They're also, honestly, trying to sell you more stuff, as everybody is. I guess, you know, the world is trying to sell you more stuff. But they really are like trying to give you just a very simple system that you can follow with fairly limited choices. That's not to say you can't create more choices with their line by mixing and doing other stuff, but their basic rollout is this is meant for a highlight, this is meant for a shadow, right? So no other paint line really does that. And so the best you could probably do is to just look at colors relative to each other. I don't know their new line very well because admittedly I have not really bought any of it. I've bought a few bottles back in the beginning to kind of test and see where they were going with their base coating and all that stuff and like what kind of resins they were working with. It's what I do whenever I see a new paint line is I tend to buy a bottle of red because red is my test color most of the time to see kind of what the paint line is about. And I can usually tell just by messing around with that one color, what kind of resin they're using, kind of what their goals are for the line as far as, you know, how it works. Which comes from being a paint line designer for so long. And you can also tell if they really don't have a plan. Or if they haven't thought about something. Like there was one paint line, and I won't mention which one it is, but there was one paint line I tried where the minute I thinned the color, it shifted, like big time. So what that told me is that the people using that color, or who created that color, or that designed the line, didn't think really about if somebody really wanted to thin their paint really, really down, right? Because when you thin Master Series for a glaze, it stays true to its color, its original color. But this line did not. When I painted it on, it was noticeably lighter than the base color, which was a weird shift probably caused by maybe the resins and maybe even the surfactants they were using with that resin. But it was profound, and I was like, whoa, okay, not thinnable. Or at least not thinnable to the level that I can thin MSP. But MSP is kind of a weird duck that way. And it's on purpose, because if you want to glaze with a color, I feel like it should stay true and not fall out of solution on you. And yeah, particle size in ours is close. Our paints do have a finer, it's more acrylic base, less like vinyl type base, but even those monikers don't really apply in today's paint world, because it used to be that those were the three king resins, but now almost every professional paint company is working with variations of those. It's no longer a real vinyl, it's no longer a real latex. They're working with synthetic components that mimic the effects of those. Although some of them will still list that they are using an acrylic polymer or a latex polymer on the bucket, if you can get a hold of it. But oh, happy birthday, Dogfather. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what paint line it was because I don't believe in dissing other people's paint lines. The best I can say, though, is if you want to try out a new paint line, like, focus on, like, one color. Like I do. I do with red because I love to paint red. And also because I feel like the reds in a paint line are just a really good way to judge like how the paint line performs. It's not a color that naturally covers very well, but it's not a super weak color either. And so you can tell just by using it and then thinning it and using it and kind of experimenting a little with it and mixing it, you can tell kind of what the paint line's focus is around. Is it going for coverage? Is it going for thinability? Is it going for intense color and a lot of saturation? What's it going for, right? And so it gives you a chance, like even like if blue is your favorite color, whenever you try a new paint line, just pick up a blue and run it through its paces, paint with it a bit, try it, mix it with white, mix it with black, mix it with your other colors and see how they interact. It's, I needed my big paintbrush again. So just try to do that as you work. That's probably the best way, honestly, Cajun Beauty, for you to learn about paint and how it differs. Because once you do that with a couple of different lines and you see like the differences, now some paint lines are going to be very, very similar. I find that Privateer Press's line and Scale 75's lines are similar in a lot of ways, though I find that Scale like thins a little better. But like some... And a lot of a lot of paint lines, especially in Europe, are all created by like one of two companies. And then I think there's another that has their paint done in China. So what it comes down to is a lot of paint companies will kind of feel very similar because if they come from the same company, they've just probably got some tweaks. So you will notice that. You will notice that some paint lines actually act extremely similarly and just seem to have different colors. Oh, I totally forgot the thing on this side. Oops, handle, thing, yeah. Words are hard. No, that's good. So turquoise is then your color, Crows, and you probably have stuff that you're looking for with a good turquoise. And for me, it's just red, and it always has been. And for the reasons I stated, that red is usually not an intrinsically high coverage color, so you can usually tell just from starting to play with their red, if they are trying to push it for coverage or if they're trying to push it for something different, like vibrancy of color and saturation. And so I always check how does it cover out of the bottle? How does it cover when I mix it 4:1 compared to MSP? How much do I have to mix it to make it into a glaze, or to thin it rather, to make it into a glaze or to get good layering out of it? How does it react to thinning when I thin it a lot? Where does it break? What's its break point? When does it start to separate when I throw it on the palette and throw water in it? All of these things tell me a lot about the paint line and whether I'm going to enjoy using it or not enjoy using it. And whether you yourself are going to like it, it really depends on, again, it goes back to like style. It goes back to the techniques you're drawn to. If you tend to use your paint quite thick, say you use a wet palette that you keep actually fairly dry, so there's not a whole lot of water wicking. If you work with a fairly dry wet palette and you work with thicker paint and you do a lot of wet blending, then you don't worry about if the paint doesn't react well to thinning because you're almost never working with it that way. An example of that actually is my fiance, David Diamondstone. He works with a lot thicker paint than I do, and he keeps his wet palette is not sopping wet. Whereas when I work with a wet palette, it is super sopping wet because I'm going for something different than he is. But so everybody's got, you're gonna develop like a liking or just you might find that you're very good at a given technique. Like intuitively, it comes to you faster and you're just like, you've got an aptitude for it. And so you're going to gravitate toward that. And that's going to influence what kind of paint you tend to like. Marika, for example, Marika Reimer, who is, mostly retired from painting now, but still does a little bit of project here and there. Marika uses very thick paint because she's always wet blending. She uses two brush, and kind of oil painter techniques to set up her blends with wet blending. So she wants a paint that's very thick and very cover heavy out of the gate. And so she doesn't like MSP for like when she's starting a model. But when she gets toward the end of the model and she's glazing, or she wants the paint to adhere better, because a lot of paints that cover well don't stick to the model as well. It's kind of a weird thing about the resin. Then she'll swap to MSP and glaze with MSP, kind of almost as a sealer and a glaze in one, because MSP is very high adhesion, which means it sticks to the model really well. I don't even seal my models after I paint them. Oh, hi, Grim. Oh, that's good. Yeah, well, just work with it, Cajun. Like, maybe get, like, if you're going to be given some GW paints, I'm just going to put a real quick second coat on this. And this is actually one of the things about MSP paints, is that usually if you want a nice, even, solid base coat, you do want to put 2 coats, 2 thin coats on there, just like Duncan says for Games Workshop. And actually, you might want to look up, like, those videos. I don't know. Duncan quit GW, and I don't know if he's still, like, featuring their paint in his videos. And I don't know if GW still has Duncan's videos up on their materials. But Duncan's videos actually are very good if you're starting out and using Games Workshop paint. He will teach you how to use it, and you will end up a better painter for it. Then after you've got that foundation, then start working with other paint lines and other more advanced techniques if you feel like it. Yes, if you shake your paints at least once a year. Streams are great, Cajun, but it doesn't compare to actually putting paint on the mini. So definitely take notes on the streams and definitely ask questions. Like, the best thing you can do is ask questions on the stream like you are, so that you can kind of start just learning some of the intellectual property that'll help you make judgment calls after you start actually painting. All right, so we got a nice solid base coat on there. That's pretty good. I need to look at the rest of the model, see if there's anything else I want to do this on. Especially if I just want to maybe do some diagonals. So essentially when you're doing colors on a model, look at diagonals as far as your composition. Let's talk color composition. Because up to now, we haven't really been worrying about it. But right now I'm like looking at this going, so color composition. Because this is definitely a red. You can see it. If you look at this is definitely a brown. It's a neutral. Your eye doesn't even look at the belt, both because it's dark and because it's neutral. But when you look up here, you definitely see a red, especially next to this yellow. And that means that we're pretty much locked into a red, yellow, blue at this point. Maybe a weird red, yellow, blue, but we are. So I've got to kind of look at this now. Since this is actually a color, I've got to look at composition. So 2 spots of it is fine, but more of it around the model would be better. So what I could do is take this anklet down here and also make that this color, but do it more like a leather texture, maybe highlight it with slightly different colors to make it different but similar. And that will, he have his own line. I wonder if he had Vallejo do it, or probably coat to arms, but maybe not. I don't know. It's hard. Like I said, there are 3 different, at least 3. I know of 3, but there may be more. A lot of people want paint lines. They want their own paint line. So I'm curious. Maybe I should pick some up. I actually haven't. I didn't know Duncan had his own line. So now I'm curious. Now I want to see what he's doing. Oh, okay. Via Kickstarter. Good idea. Yeah, he seems like a savvy guy. That's the thing about, I hate to say this, but that's the thing about GW employees, is if they're at all savvy, they tend to leave Games Workshop and go off and do their own thing. That's actually why Games Workshop stopped giving sculptors credit on their products. Or that's what I heard. But we won't talk about that too much, but yeah. So Duncan, that's very interesting. I'll have to go and look up his paint line. Does it have a particular name, or is it just Duncan Rhodes, isn't it? I forget his last name. But I'm curious now. I need to order a couple bottles of red. Yeah, I mean, you can do a lot of stuff with craft paint, especially, I mean, airbrushing it, in my mind, is a little bit dicey, but it depends on how thick you keep it. Just because one of the things about craft paint is it tends to separate, and it also tends to be very light pigment. Like, the reason craft paint is so cheap, Cajun, is that they're using a really cheap paint base, and they're using less pigment. They're using a lot of fillers instead. So that means that even though somebody managed to airbrush with it, it's probably still not the best paint for airbrushing. So that's what you should keep in mind. You can paint with craft paint, but there are some techniques that you will find more difficult with it because of the low pigment count and also the way the base. The cheapest bases tend to be very high coverage and thick. But their thickness isn't always it's not like due to like extra pigment or anything. It's due to fillers. and stuff that they're putting in there to thicken the paint. And what happens then is when you thin it, you have to thin it more to get it to a decent level, but that tends to break it. So I haven't messed around with Apple Barrel and the other craft paint lines for a long time, and I know they have been making changes. I think one of them in particular, it put out a color shift line, and the colors are pretty nice, although I don't know what the fineness of the flake is. So definitely try everything. Like if you want to try craft paint, pick up a bottle. And keep in mind that, your tests shouldn't just be base coating. Your tests should be, a bunch of different things. So now we've got color composition going on. The color up here is echoed here and here. And in two-dimensional art, the truism is you want an odd number of colors. So if you're going to do a color, do 3, do 5, do that kind of spots. So here we've got 3 spots of the reddish brown now. Golden so flat. Well, Golden is an art brand though. That's not a craft paint. Oh, he was thinning it down with Windex? Yep. Windex chemically acts to hold the paint together because of the surfactants in it. That's an old trick. Like that's an ancient trick. Cajun, when I started with Reaper, like even before I started with Reaper, 20 years ago, people were thinning their airbrush paints with Windex to get better results. Now, what he's not showing you though, Cajun, is that because you're thinning with that Windex, the paint is not going to stick to the model unless you seal. Now, if you're going to seal, then you're fine. But it's just something to remember. Whenever you use a chemical, like not water, whenever you use something that's not water to thin a paint, you're going to impact something about it. You're going to impact the finish. You're going to impact the adhesion. You're going to impact how it thins. You're going to impact something. And so, like, the reason I don't use slow dry or drying retarder very much, like, I think maybe once in the last 3 years have I ever used it. The reason that I don't is that it impacts the adhesion, and I can't stand it when paint rubs off my models. So chemistry for you. This is something you're not going to find on any other stream, unless other painters have been watching my stream and telling people what I say. But from a chemistry background, that works, but yeah, whenever you're adding anything, it definitely has something to do with it. Ed used to do that. Actually, when I started at Reaper, I think he airbrushed one of our dinosaur models, and he used Windex. And that's what I noticed about it. I noticed that he got a much more even. He had nice even coverage. And it did affect the finish a bit. But it rubbed off like so easily. So you'd had to put like multiple coats on, and then you'd have to seal, and then you'd have to do more paint work. Or you'd have to put like washes with sealer over it to help with the adhesion. Yeah, Duracoat, yes. Pretty fine flake, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the thing is, and actually let me illustrate this, Cratho. That's Crathognis. This is actually a thing I found. So I am using, to paint this model, I am using scale 75. I'm using scale color. So, scale color artist. Tube paint. It's essentially tube paint made by a miniature paint company, which means it can be used on miniatures and it has an excellent finish. But what I find with it is that it is much harder to blend. So let me show you. My work is usually very fine, and you have a hard time seeing brush strokes on most of my work. But here, I've definitely got brush strokes going on here. Now, part of that is that I'm painting fast, but that's not all of it. Part of it is just that these paints don't blend like MSP do. You can see it. You can see the roughness here. See the brush strokes? So what I'm going to have to do is either glaze the heck out of this, or I'm going to have to swap to Master Series entirely for highlights. Oh, it is a fantastic tube paint too. Like I would use Scale Color Artist over any other tube paint for miniatures for sure. The other thing that tube paint does suffer from is that it does fall out of solution if you thin it extremely, and it does also suffer that adhesion thing where it's not made to be thinned and to stick to models. Like, that's not the point of tube paint, right? You're supposed to be painting it on canvas and giving it like a real tooth of gesso or something that it can dig into and hold on to, and you're not supposed to be thinning it so much. So when you do that, when you use it for kind of an unintended purpose, you do run into that where it's a little bit easier to rub off. And I have seen that on this model. But I wanted to work with artist colors again, like Naples yellow, and so that was what I was doing. But yeah, so tube paints suffer from that. And you'll find if you do work with Master Series, that Master Series blends really well. Like, that's, as far as layering goes, that's what I wanted from it. That was its key thing. I wanted it to be really good at thinned applications. Yeah. The thing I love about the scale color is that, and I have an art school background. I did go to college for art. And the thing that I really find that I like is that a lot of artist tube paints, like, they're changing now. They're starting to put out matte lines. But in the old days, matte in artist products just meant satin. Like, it was gloss or satin, which they called matte. And yeah, so now, like, Liquitex is putting out a super matte line, and the art companies seem to have realized that there's, especially for illustration painting, there's this market out there now for matte finishes. But before, it wasn't so. And so some old tube paints are still gonna have a lot of glossiness to them. And I like a finish like MSP, and that scale color line has the same finish. So if I'm gonna use tube paint, I'm gonna do that. Or, as I said, like, for blending and everything else, I just go with the MSP. But yeah. Yes. And you can work with that if you add additives. If you add mediums, Crethognis. Some mediums will help with adhesion. Most of them will, because they're just resin in a clear base. So they're pretty much just there for the body. So if you get a higher acrylic one and mix a drop in, it will make your paint more transparent, but it will also help it stick. Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, though I do like to say that I have learned more about painting since I began mini painting than I ever learned in art school. And that is absolutely 100% true. Like, they don't, in art school, I haven't yet met an art school or heard of an art school that breaks this down this granularly. All right, let's see if I can do a shadow with this, or if I need to darken it down a bit. I'm going to thin it a bit more to a glaze level. Like here. See how thin it is. And that's what MSP is great at. I can thin it to this level, and it's not separating. It's going to stay the color I like it. A couple of paint lines frustrated the heck out of me because I always had to stop and remix them constantly to keep them in solution after I thin them. And it's just not my favorite thing. Yeah, right? Except that it's two different markets. It's never the twain shall meet, although now they're meeting. Declearment. It's because industrial supply, art supply, and paint supply was a totally different world than art, like art supply. And it still kind of is, but it depends. And what's happened is that all of these fields of visual productivity borrow from each other. So, like, acrylic inks were stolen from the textile industry, who created them because they wanted a dye that didn't bleed. So they essentially chemically treated regular paint pigments so that they would adhere to fibers like dyes. And that's how De La Rowney, stealing that technology or borrowing it, brought it into the art world, and acrylic inks became a thing, and then other people copied it. And the same thing happened with industrial pigments and art pigments, where the industrial pigment companies are like, we need to make this easier. We're going to break this down to a series of about 12 to 15 pigments, and we're going to make a warm and a cool, and we're going to concentrate on coverage, right? We're going to coverage on, and we want hiding. We want people to be able to put a coat of this on their wall and not have to put a second coat down, because that's going to sell our paint. So they worked with the bases, but they also had to work with the pigments. So they made a higher coverage yellow, a higher coverage red. And that technology was stolen by the art companies when they were like, dang it, we can't do cadmium anymore because it's poisonous, so we really need to shift to non-toxic. And we can steal this from these industrial paint companies because they've already created high coverage organic reds and yellows. So everybody out there doing these visual products, visual industry products, let's call it that for lack of a better term, they're always watching each other at this point. And they're always going to be like snagging stuff that's interesting that might give them an edge in the market as they perceive it. Because so much of this stuff can be used in different ways across discipline to make better products for the artist. Does that make sense to you guys? Oh, sorry, Reaper Master Series paints. Yes. Not really, Cajun Beauty. Master Series paints are, what are we at now? Are we at $4.29 a bottle? We are much less than GW. Yeah, and instructions too. Thanks, Krith Agnes. Yeah, I think we mentioned the Learn to Paint kits to you before, Cajun. They're a really good buy. You end up getting a lot for your $35. So I'm going to see how this works. Now, my problem, I think, is going to be that I'm maybe a little bit too light with this. When I darkened my midtone, I ended up making it about the same as my shadow. So what I have to do is adjust my shadow. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Yeah, our paints, we call them Master Series paints because they are made pretty much for every discipline. So from beginner level all up to high and advanced. They're for everybody. $3.69 for Bones and Core. Okay, so actually they're under $4 a bottle. And I'm going to grab, I think, Ultramarine Blue. Because I've got a lot of purple here. And I think I want to shift it a bit. And I want to go darker. Where's my Ultramarine Shadow? Do I have it? Or will I have to use something else? It's always a question. There we go. I knew I had it. Okay, so Ultramarine Shadow is one of the prettiest colors in Master Series. Oh, good. Yeah, Bones is great. Bones, I think, is I've said this before, but Bones to me is the pinnacle of my paint line design, career. I think I did a better job designing Bones. I pretty much was able to use new technology and all of the knowledge I'd built up over the 15 or so years, or at that point, I guess it was more like 14 or 13 years I'd been making paint lines for Reaper. You definitely always learn. I was still learning the day that I my last day on the paint line, I was still learning. There's so much to learn. I don't know, Cajun. Maybe because Vallejo is got a lot of market penetration. I find Vallejo not typically that beginner friendly because they do fall apart under thinning. I guess it could be because they have high coverage out of the bottle, or it could just be that Vallejo has been around for a long time and a lot of people are fans. I mean, it was a good paint line. When Reaper hired me, and I actually forgot to mention this yesterday on Michael's show on Crow's Nest, but when Reaper hired me and wanted me to create a new paint line, they actually directly wanted a competitor for Vallejo because Vallejo was the big game in town 20 years ago. As far as quality paint lines, it was the highest quality. But it's had supply issues, and that unfortunately has kept it from, at least here in America, it's had a lot of supply issues. So it's kept it from becoming the dominant paint line in America. I think that America is more balanced. I think that people use a lot of different stuff here, including Vallejo, but also including Reaper and Chimera and, all of the various boutique Turbo Dork is getting some mileage now. All that sort of thing. Yes, Valandar has the point. Just like I said earlier, play around with different brands. What I would recommend is whatever your favorite color is, get a bottle of that, and then maybe pick up the black and the white. I actually don't pick up black from most paint companies. I find them to be very, very close to each other as far as quality for black. But white can make a huge difference in how easy it is for you to build highlights and how your paint is going to thin and how it's going to work. So I usually pick up white and I'll pick up red. And then if there are any interesting other colors where I really just like the color, I'll pick that up. And then if I like it, like I did the scale tube paints, I picked up one set. And it took me a while to mess up with them, but once I decided I liked them, I bought almost the whole set now. Yeah, Vallejo has some very pretty colors. Oxford Blue is my favorite. That purpley indigo, that notice how close it is to... The great thing about designing a paint line, guys, is that you can steal colors from other paint lines and make them the way you want them. Yes, I'm terrible. All right, so I've gotten this a little darker, but is it dark enough? So we've talked about shades, how many shades apart your highlights and shadows should be. When I talk about shades, I'm talking about the grayscale. And that's here on your color wheel, if you have a tiny color wheel, such as I do. And you can use this actually much easier than you think if you put it over your palette. So essentially what you want to do is you want to put the edge over the color. Let's get these down here. And you kind of want to kind of squint and see. You can see that value 6, like this color, is darker than value 6 by a bit. Let's see if I mix it up a little bit. Sometimes it'll have like gotten a little bit of a skin on the top and you want to mix it up and compare. So that's closer, but you can see that 6 is still lighter than that color. Whereas value 5 is about right. If you kind of squint, you can still see the edge, but the other one is darker. So it's kind of like a value 4, value 5. So we actually are starting very dark here. Let me look. Yeah, I think it's about a value 5 looking in person. The camera makes it look a little different. So then we want our next color down to be 1.5 to 2 steps further down. And this is about a value 2. Well, we're almost to pure black already. So now we've got a problem where this color, we need to go substantially darker. So I may need to actually add a color that's like blue liner to get this to work, to be an effective shadow where it's darker than this. Or I could cheat, I suppose. No, I don't want to cheat. Let's see. Where's my Death Knight Black? Let's use that. Fast palette color. This is a black indigo. Yeah, whether we throw in a bottle of paint, it depends on supply. We don't always have time to pump samples. It's the lowest priority thing in the paint department to pump samples. Or if we haven't made any mistakes lately, there might not be a sample. So it depends by season though too, because usually we do like a special paint for Valentine's, and we do breast cancer awareness pink in October, and we do Christmas colors and Halloween colors and all that stuff. So it all depends. Yeah, shipping costs have gone up. That's why. I was kind of astonished and horrified at how much shipping costs have gone up. So I put a drop of Death Knight Black in. I could also have used Black Indigo, but Death Knight Black is available in the Gloom Engrave Fast Palette. I really like it. It is a liner color, so it's a little transparent, which makes it an excellent shadow. So essentially, I'm going to squint my eyes and kind of see if this is dark enough yet. I think I want one more drop. I don't think you can, Krathagnis. The place that usually people share that stuff is, I think, in our forums, or maybe on Facebook. I don't know. Quindy, is there a good spot to drop like something like that, a PDF of colors of MSP? You don't want to drop it in the stream because then it's just gone. We used to have stuff like that on our forum. Oh, okay. Or you can just ask the Discord, yeah. All right, so the thing about mixing a black paint into any other color, Cajun, is there are pigment interactions you should know about. For instance, if you mix a paint with a lot of black into anything that's yellowish, it will go greenish. And then there are some reds where black will take them purple, or it may take them brown. So sometimes when you mix, you're going to get interactions which will shift it to an entirely different color than you thought. Like you may think that black plus red equals dark red, but actually it doesn't. Yeah, that's why, I mean, for me, I'm just like, and it depends on where you are in the world as well. Yes, and the famous red plus green equals purple. Actually, it equals blue. Valandar. Red plus green equals blue. That's a great one. That's the one that blows people's minds the most. Although you seldom run into it, what you'll find is you'll get a bluish shift. But it's such a weak shift. It's a very, very weak color. You throw anything else at it, it disappears. So that particular chemical blue, as I call it, is it's more like if I'm working with a purple and I try to add green, or vice versa, if I'm working with a green and I'm trying to add a little purple to produce a shadow, I'll often see it shift toward blue instead of toward something more complicated. You use Army Painter and everyone says switch to Reaper. Army Painter is like, you know, it's what it is. I think I always felt like Army Painter was not trying, they're trying to make an accessible paint line that produces certain results, right? Because they're trying to help you paint your army fast. And so the choices that they're going to make are going to be paints that function in that way, which means that those paints may not support more advanced techniques if you're trying to become a better painter. They won't act as well when you're gonna have to thin them, when you're gonna have to like try to figure out paint consistency for textures or for layering or for whatever. That's why I say it's important to know what company's purpose is in creating a paint line. Because GW and Army Painter are kind of doing the same thing. They're going to hand you a fish. They're going to tell you, okay, each of these paints is for this particular purpose. And in Army Painter's case and in GW's case, the purpose is to paint your armies very efficiently and quickly so you can get to gaming. So yeah, their washes, I'm pretty sure, are Minwax variants, but I'm not sure on that. They act like it. They act like a Minwax. Well, Apple Barrel is not made for miniatures painting. I mean, understand that that is really a thing, guys. It's really a thing. Miniatures paint is different. It's been adopted by 2D painters, especially those who do illustration, like Wayne Reynolds, because of its finish and its smoothness, and the fact that you can thin it and get smoother, finer effects with it. But like craft paint is not meant for miniatures. It's meant for a variety of kind of cheap grade crafts. Like you want to use, it's meant for crafts that cover a lot of surface and require a lot of material, so it's cheaper. So like painting a wooden chair for your kid. That's what craft paint, that's why it's inexpensive for so much. That's why they keep it cheaper. The point of craft paint is to make it, is to make it affordable for you to, as a craft person, to paint a larger thing. Oh, there's a little metal pit there. Interesting. I'll have to paint that over. Yeah, totally. I mean, Ed's right on that one. Like, using a big old brush and craft paint, that's a very large project. You could do it. You just, it depends on your techniques, though. Remember, it's not meant for high-end art techniques. So I'm putting some of this blue-purple in the shadows here just to see how it plays. I'm interested in it. But yeah, paint lines have a purpose and they're made to work best at that purpose. And you can take a paint line and use it for something that goes against its purpose. Absolutely you can, but you may find that it is more difficult or it doesn't give you as good results to use that paint line for a purpose that isn't in line with its original purpose. It's because they're usually going to be built with a particular group of techniques in mind. And Master Series is also built with a particular group of techniques in mind, and those techniques are high-end painting techniques. So for me, I want a paint that's going to not take a lot of thinning to produce great washes, great glazes, and like pretty much flawless layering. And so that guided my choices when I created MSP. Like as far as what bases I used, what pigments I was using, how I was going to tackle coverage, all of those things are defined by the choices you make as far as what your purpose and what's the intended use of your line. So I like this purple. We'll see how it plays when I start highlighting. It's a little bit cartoony at this point. I need to bring in actual like walnut or brown liner. Let's do brown liner. I need to line a bit up here and get things to stand out. Oh, rip. Yeah, whenever you need a lot of paint. Whenever you need a lot of paint, like it makes sense for terrain and stuff to buy craft paint. But if you're looking to like do really fine layering, it's probably going to betray you is the best way I can put it. It's just not meant for that. And some of it will do an okay job at that, but it will also make it harder for you on some techniques. I had a friend who tried to do, like you see people who win golden demons using craft paint because they're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to prove it can be done. And you know what? It can be done. Can you paint a great mini with toothpicks? Sure you can. But are you going to be blowing a crap ton of time on learning how to counter the weak points of your chosen tools? Yes. Will that teach you a lot about adapting your paint style to different tools? Yes. So is it lost? Is it a loss really? No, but it's how much time and where do you want to spend your time? You know, for me, I want a paint that's going to help me because I want to learn more like awesome techniques. I want to be able to do even better freehand. I want to be able to do ever finer textures. I don't want my paint to fight me because what I want to do is concentrating on technique. I want to get better at lighting. I want to get better at, you know, a lot of stuff, at painting a little faster, you know, which really painting faster, I think, comes down to like quicker blends and better like better grasp of lighting. So for me, it doesn't make sense to work with a paint line that's going to require me to work a little harder at learning how to use it. That's why MSP is so like, that's why I made it where I did. I used to get frustrated with Vallejo because the amount of water I had to pack into that paint to get it to where I wanted it, just like it took forever for me, impatient me. And so when MSP came up, I wanted to focus on it. I wanted it to be thinnable to a very, very fine level. And I wanted it to, and with that, I wanted it to get there faster. I didn't want to have to fight against a really thick base. Because for me, I don't ever use full strength paint. I thin even my base coats. And even for people that use full strength paint for their base coats, that's usually the only time you're using full strength paint. For almost every other application, from washes to layering to glazing, you're going to thin it a little. So making it easier to get to that point for those techniques, I thought was worthwhile. But yes, you can do anything with anything if you figure out how to make it work. Paint is, in the end, paint is paint is paint is paint. And it's just the different qualities of it that will make certain things easier and certain things more difficult. So if you want to go out there and win a golden demon with craft paint, do it. I am darkening down all of these shards. I'm painting them essentially with liner. Just because I haven't decided what they are yet. They're obviously stone, but I haven't decided what color they're going to be yet. So I'm blocking. This is kind of the block in that I'll do with lining. And I would do the same if I decided to make them bone. Because I want them to stand out from the wood. So I am essentially choosing to paint them with liner to start that process. And then when I go in to decide what color they'll be, I'm going to leave this liner at the very base of these where they come out of the wood. And it's going to end up giving them kind of a dirty effect down there, as if dirt has caked up around where they enter the wood, which it would. Good, good. I'm glad. Yeah, that's cool that Vince likes it. I mean, I always love to hear that painters love my paint line. It's and that they appreciate it for what its purpose is. Like that just makes my little heart explode with happy, because that's what I was out for. And to have somebody recognize that that is what it is good at, like that is where it excels, and to use it in that way, like that gratifies me immensely. Because not every painter, and we were talking a little bit about this on Crow's Nest yesterday, not every painter stops to think about why they do what they do, or why they like this paint so much, you know, in as fine terms as that. A lot of them just do what they do. And to stop and analyze it is something they don't naturally reach for that. They internalize a thing and they just keep going. Whereas if you're me, you have a super analytical mind that likes to know why. Why does it work? How does it work? What is it good for? Why? Why is it good for that? And so that leads to a bit more examination and the ability to kind of describe pros and cons maybe a little bit better. But I mean, a lot of painters have trouble like breaking down, writers too, like anybody in a creative pursuit. There are people who like naturally are drawn to kind of the number crunching aspect of it and why and how it works. And there are people who just want to do it and excel at it. And it takes all kinds. So my lining is, I'm using it a bit as a shader, a bit as a liner, more of a liner than a shader though. I will bring it in on these little pits on the wood, knots, to darken those down. I like how the purple is working as a shading color down here, but it didn't look right in the knots. So yeah, you could also probably mix, like, you'd get close to Ashen Brown if you mix, like, Creamy Ivory into Volcano and maybe adjusted it a little bit. Paint is paint is paint. When in doubt, mixing it a white or an off-white into your base color will always give you a decent highlight. Although you may wish to utilize a yellow with white instead in the case of reds, oranges, and greens. So a little bit. See, that's too harsh. When I line that crack, that doesn't give me the effect I want. So, even though the pit there is right. So I'm going to paint over that real quick. And I'll probably end up highlighting around that instead. Kobolds. I love kobolds. They're my second favorite monster race. After gnolls. A little bit of dark bluey shadow here. Alrighty. Oh, that's right. We've got a nice shield here that can also be an accent color. So see what we've got back here then? We've got a natural three-step, three-color accent. So I was already thinking about making this red, which we'll see how it works with the reddish wood now. But if I make this red, I'll probably make these red as well, so that I can move the color around the model. Might go with a dark red, so that it doesn't fight so much with the wood, where I'm going to be bringing that up with browns. We shall see. Well, Crows, yeah, just point out to him that if he really doesn't like his Vallejo anymore, he can always gift it to a new painter. a future friend who's just starting out in the hobby. But that sounds to me like his style is much more like mine, where Vallejo can be frustrating. But I'm really glad he likes them. Tell him the creator of the paint line says, awesome. I'm glad you like them. Like, it is the thing that I did, the thing that I gave to the hobby that I have been a part of for so long. At least I was able to give the hobby something significant. Well, and as long as the internet is around, you know, these videos also, these shows are also a gift. Alrighty. So we've got that purple. You can see that purple undertone. I like it, actually. It's complex. Once we start adding highlights, it's going to get even more complex, and I like that. For these guys, gotta watch out. Actually, this is kind of Mazamuni. It's a good question, actually. I could go with a cooler color. Although if I go with a blue that's at all saturated, it's going to totally fight with this. That's the problem. We're going to run into the problem we ran into up here, except that I pushed this more neutral now. So I might be able to get away with a red here. I might be able to get away with a very dark blue here. That's a valid choice. That's totally a valid choice, especially if I highlight it with a gray blue. That could work. I'm kind of Sergioing this one, though. Sergio's got this philosophy. And you could do blue with it also. But he thinks that on a given model, like you should go more with warm, like you should go with warm or with cool. And in that case, the way you interpret that is if you go with a blue, you go with a blue that has a bit of green in it. So you can still go with a warm blue and fulfill Sergio's criteria. But here I really did I had in mind that I wanted a very warm color scheme for this model. With the exception of the fur. And I am going to shift the fur even a little bit more warm. So totally valid to do like maybe a dark blue or a dark blue black that you can bring up with gray. You want something that's vibrant enough to work with the skin tone, but not something that's going to fight with this fur. The fur is pale in general, except for the sabling pattern. So we probably could get away with it. But because I kind of set out in my head with the goal of using a very warm color scheme on this one, because the problem I'm running into, to kind of go further on that, is the problem I'm running into with this blue is that it is hard to portray the golden color of the light against it without totally shifting its color. Like, properly, it should be shifting toward green. And so, or at least toward more yellow, like kind of dirty green. And so I'm going to have to do that. And it's harder to do that with a blue than it is a red. It's much easier to highlight red up with a golden color. It looks great. Whereas here I'm fighting a little bit with my internal idea of the color. Because it doesn't come naturally to me yet to alter. Like, it does in some colors. My fiance is really good at this, but he'll, like, if there's a colored light shining on a thing, he'll understand, like, how to shift the color underneath to make it look right. But there's an act to it. And so if I choose blue, it's going to be, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced I'm going to like it. So that's why, that's kind of my thought process is there. I often will push myself in this sort of manner, but I won't do it on a stream. Like, I'll do it on a model that I'm painting for myself, which is why I'm, like, pushing lighting effects on Miss Forest Demon here. And I am pushing a bit of lighting effect on this guy as well, I suppose. But there's a time, like, where you have to follow your art, like, your gut color instinct. And my gut color instinct says red. NMM aspect? I don't know if he's got any metal. This is leather, I think. Like, he's got, I don't know if he has any metal. He may have some, the belt buckle is metal. Skulls are bone. This is NMM. So we'll be doing some NMM on here. This, I think, is bone also. But yeah, this one I was definitely thinking was studded leather. So Could make it a shiny leather. It'll act a lot like NMM, not quite, but we could do that. But I mean, you could do the same thing with NMM red. Yeah, we haven't done NMM for a while. I'll be moving back in that direction now that we've done all these metallics like we're doing. And I will be doing NMM on this guy. It's just he doesn't have a lot of metal. Yeah. Start with simple shapes. Start with a simple sword and a simple breastplate. What's the most important thing is to understand how light falls on various surfaces. Before you even think about reflection, you have to understand how light will fall and what shape it will, what form it will take on a rounded surface, on a cylinder, on a straight blade, held horizontally, held vertically. It's that kind of thing. Sphere is not too bad. I mean, sphere is probably a good thing to start with in some ways. The reflection is difficult, but the highlight is pretty easy. At least as long as you're considering viewing angles. And that's the other thing to consider when you do NMM is that you've got to figure out what the viewing angles, what the primary viewing angle on a model is. For example, on this guy, this is one viewing angle, pretty much. And this is the other. Because if you're looking at this guy, you're not looking at him like this, right? He's definitely a two-sided model. And if we did a tattoo here, this would become a viewing angle. But otherwise, it's not. It doesn't have enough interesting detail to grab the viewer. So most people are going to look at the front and look at the back, which means that any NMM we do on here, we need to just consider from those two angles. That makes it easier. When you've got a model that has several viewing angles, like Noli has a viewing angle from the front, and she's got a viewing angle from the back, but she's also got a viewing angle from the side and even from the other side because she's got a lot of detail. So Noli is more difficult to do NMM on if she had any metal. Well, she does have some metal in her hair, but that's a little easier. But yeah, so models that have many viewing angles are harder because it's very difficult whether you're using metallics or you're using NMM. It is difficult to make a NMM surface read from 3 different angles at once. Cylinders are a little easier, but I find cylinders to be a bit easier. I do not want to go there, crows. My ogre shaves his pits. I'm just going to go there. Yeah, focus on the light and the shape of the light first. Remember that when you are highlighting a surface, the shape of the highlight will be the shape of the surface. So if you have a rounded area, your highlights are going to be rounded. And if you've got like kind of a triangular area, your highlight will be kind of triangular. And if you've got an oblong area, your highlight will be more oblong. If you've got a rounded area, your highlight is more round. So that creates the sense of volume, like the sense of the shape. And then shadows give you mass. And those shadows should also emulate the shape. See this? So even though this is regular, you can see a bit of an NMM here because I've got some reflected light. See? Back here in the shadow. So you got to get your shadow in there and then worry about the reflection. And of course, the reflection on the ogre's side is going to be a lot more downplayed than it would be on metal. Let's see here. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Lighting. But yeah, there's a lot of great tutorials on highlighting NMM on various surfaces out there. So I am certain you will find many things to help guide you. Yeah, I did almost all NMM up to recently. It was seldom that I did a metallic figure. Then we picked this bronze golem, and I decided to do metal on the knoll that we're painting, the knoll pirate. So I've been doing a lot of metallics lately, so I'll probably rebound and do some NMMs, a lot of NMMs coming forward. I haven't decided. We've got a couple models getting close to done, so I'll have to decide on replacements soon. I did order some fun stuff from Reaper, so we'll see what I decide on. right, just doing some shading around the ogre's fingers here to make sure that they stand out well from the wood. I haven't done a full highlight on them yet. Bigger models just take a lot longer. Like there's a lot more components. There's a lot more going on, but the lining helps to make the hand more crisp up here, so. Yep. Yeah, you could do the oil paint or you can just do it with a wash. Or you can do, actually a lot of people do that with Zenith lighting, Masamune. I guess though the oil makes sense because it'll give you the reflections. You can also do it with just white primer though. Let me show you, hold on. So the way to do it with just a black and white prime or a white prime. So let's say we've got our bones model here. Let's pretend he's primed. Let's grab a strong color and a strong light. So what you can do is you can get a strong light and then you can put a strong color under it. See how you can see the blue in the shadows? So that's gonna, essentially putting a color down as your under reflection will make it more evident. If you're just using a white primed model, this works great. Like do I have my little lamp? Hold on. Let me see if my little lamp's battery was dying, so I don't know if it's gonna work. Let's see. I didn't replace its battery yet, but I used to do this with an orange piece of paper, but blue works. Any colorful sticky note works, yeah. So if you've got a bright enough light, you can get your highlights down and you can also see blue bouncing up on the under reflections. And it depends, like you want to kind of, it's even better. I think it's even better if it's a big broad light from above and I'm kind of blocking it, but you kind of get the idea. So you can do it with white primer. I tend to do it with that if I want that sort of thing. I find that putting oil on the model is just like, and then I have to clean it up. I'm lazy. Yeah, that wasn't a great example. I don't have a white primed model or I could have shown it a little better. The bones material wasn't reflecting as well as I would hope. But it can do quite well to put, especially if you use a color that's like your ground color. Like if you use like a brown piece of paper, if your dirt is going to be brown, if you can do that and bounce that light back up. But yeah, so the only thing that makes me not want to do the oils is just the cleanup idea before I actually get to paint. I tend to shy away from anything that requires me to do even more work before I can start putting paint on. And I do find that like bare resin and white primed figures like do reflect different colors of light adequately enough for me to make a note of them. But yeah, under reflections are of course the thing that Zenith does not do. It's one of the flaws of Zenith priming. There we go, a little bit better. But yeah, it's an interesting thought to do an oil, so it makes it much more reflective. I knew people who would do it with a metal model. If you have just if you're using a metal miniature, you can put it on top of a colored piece of paper and shine a light down on it, and you'll get highlights and colored reflections. And the other thing you can do actually is depending, but I've also used like cool light from a window versus warm light from a lamp to like see a back and forth on that. Because sometimes that's pretty striking. I wonder, I've got a picture of it. I'm almost done. But let me see if I can whip out those pictures real quick. Just to show you what I mean. Oh, photos. And it would have been last year. If I don't find it fast, I'll just move on. All these art gallery photos. You'd think I liked two-dimensional art or something. No, too far. It must have been in COVID because... Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so... This is a model from Black Crow. And I took this picture because you can clearly see the warm light, the main light source here, and the cool light behind on the window. There's another one. Warm light on the front, cool light, blue from the window. So if I wanted to do a bright light on the front of this figure and a cool light on the back, or vice versa, these are great reference photos to have. So here again, I took it from the front. You can still see a little bit of that cool light creeping around. And then here it shows up really well because you can see the cold light on the back of the axe. You can also see, I didn't move the figure for this. I just moved my camera around and took photos. So you can see the cool light here and the warm light here. And you can even see that boundary shadow coming down between the cool and warm light, which is something that happens. So it's really cool to be able to do this. If you have a double light source, you can set it up so that you can take pictures and then you have a record of that. So when I go to paint this figure and I decide maybe to make the front in daylight and the back in forge light, as if she's standing in the front of, like a blacksmith shop, then I can paint it appropriately because I have these references. Oh, that's another good shot with the shield. So warm light on the front, you can see the warm light falling, but you can also see that reflection from the cool light on the back, and then an overall boundary shadow here because the rounded surface takes the light differently. So yeah, doing a bunch of stuff like that can really teach you a lot about how light falls. Alrighty, well, we've got this at least blocked in and we can do more next time. We won't be reading. Yeah, it's Luca. All right, I don't want to hold up Luca. I know I started a little bit late, but it's 08 now, so we won't hold Luca up anymore. Thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I appreciate having a lot of people asking questions and making great suggestions and coming up with really cool ideas. So today we just worked on, we talked a lot about like color theory and color composition and paint line analysis. Differences between paint lines, kind of how to test your paint line to see if it, this is a line for you, all that kind of stuff. We talked, this was a very info heavy stream, and we talked a bit about paint chemistry as well. So thank you everybody for coming out, and thanks for sharing all your ideas and thoughts on all of the subjects. I love it. I hope you all have a great day, and I hope that you enjoy Luca's stream. All right, so have a great one.